Welcome to ShiftWatch. I'm your host, Starbuck. In this episode, Understanding Dimensions, another look at comprehending this notion of higher and lower planes from the brilliant minds at Spirit Science. Next, huge flaring recorded off both solar limbs with filament eruptions that are hundreds of thousands of kilometers long. Tamitha Skov brings us her unique update of these historic conditions coming off the sun's surface. Then, another report of UAP Starcraft witnessed and recording by this news source who has had multiple recent experiences. And finally, once again, here's Spirit Science with some truths no less relevant than when this content was first posted 13 years ago. To quantum mechanics, physics, comprehension, that thoughts become things.
Now we can start talking about dimensions. These wheels are some of the oldest symbols known. The only places that they've been found is on the ceilings of certain very old Egyptian tombs. They are always found in sets of 4 or 8, and nobody knows what they are. Even the most famous Egyptologists have no idea, but this is actually proof that the Egyptians not only understood the flower of life, but they lived it. Today, I'm going to show you what these wheels meant, and in future lessons, we will go over the details of this unraveling. There's a lot to cover before we get there though. For the record, the unraveling looks like this. Yeah, it's a doozy. So on the walls with these wheels are drawings of 7 people with animal heads. They're called kneaders, and each of them has an orangish-red oval above its head. This is called the egg of metamorphosis. The kneaders are showing us a time when we go through a certain stage of resurrection, which is a rapid biological change into a different life form. Not the average type of resurrection, I know. As you can see here, they're changing directions 90 degrees, and in doing so, they're changing dimensions. See, the dimensional levels are separated by 90 degrees. Musical notes are separated by 90 degrees. The chakras are also 90 degrees. It's a number that continually appears. Probably at this point we should get a common understanding of what dimensions are, like 3rd dimension, 4th dimension, 5th dimension. What are we talking about here? Most people think of dimension in terms of time and space, the x, y, and z axis, with time becoming the 4th dimension. This is not what we are talking about. What we're seeing as the various dimensional levels has more to do with music and harmonics than anything else. A piano has 8 white keys from C to C, which is the familiar octave, and in between there are 5 black keys. Together this creates what is called the chromatic scale, which is 13 notes, well actually 12, with the 13th being the first in the next octave. So from one C to the next is really 13 steps, not 8. This also correlates with the 7, 8, and 13 chakra system I mentioned in lesson 2. Keeping that in mind, I want to show you a sine wave. Sine waves correspond with light and the electromagnetic spectrum and the vibration of sound. We're all very familiar with this. In this entire reality we're in, every single thing is based on sine waves. There are no exceptions to this except for maybe spirit and void. Quantum physics and quantum mechanics looks at everything in the reality of one of 2 ways. You can look at anything, like the computer you're watching this video on, to be made up of tiny particles like atoms. Or you can forget about that idea completely and look at it as a vibration, a waveform, such as electromagnetic fields or even sound. If you look at it as atoms, the laws can be seen to fit that model. But if you look at it as waveforms, the laws can be seen to fit that model. Both of these systems come out of the flower of life, one being the one we just looked at, fruit of life to Metatron's cube and beyond, and the other being this beautiful mess of a picture. Just looking at it hurts my head. Everything in this world is a waveform, or can be seen as sound. All things, your bodies, planets, absolutely everything, are a waveform. If you choose this particular way of looking at reality, and then superimpose that view over the reality of the harmonics of music, we can begin to talk about dimensions. The dimensional levels are nothing but different base rate wavelengths. The only difference between this dimension and any other is the length of its basic waveform. It's just like a radio set. Turn the dial, you pick up a wavelength. It's the same with dimensions. If you were to change the wavelength of your consciousness, and in doing so change all of your body patterns to a wavelength different from this universe, you would literally disappear out of this world and reappear in the one you were tuned in. It's been theorized that the base rate wavelength that we're currently living in is 7.23 centimeters. There's a few reasons for this. In a spiritual sense, the 7.23 wavelength is Om, the Hindu sound of the universe. Maybe that's why Oming is such a powerful tool in meditation. Not only that, but if you were to take 100 people and measure the distance between their eyes, the average length is 7.23. Same with the distance from the tip of our chins to the tip of our noses, and the distance across our palms and between our chakras. This 7.23 length is located throughout our bodies in various ways because we are emerged within this particular dimension. There's another reason as well. Bell Laboratories found this wavelength when they were setting up the microwave system around the United States. They found static in their system because they chose a wavelength just slightly longer than 7.23 for their system. In order to get rid of the static, they did something that we as a planet are still suffering from. They upped the power 50,000 times over what we would normally need, which created a very powerful field, so that the 7.23 wavelength would not interfere. It's for those reasons that I believe 7.23 is the wavelength of our dimension. As you go up in dimensional levels, the wavelength gets shorter and shorter, with higher and higher energy. As you go down in levels, the wavelength gets longer and longer, with lower and lower energy, more and more dense. Just as with a piano, there's a space between the notes, so that when you hit one note, there's a very definite place where the next note is. In this waveform universe we exist in, there's a very definite place where the next dimensional level exists. Its specific wavelength relative to this one. Most cultures in the cosmos have a basic understanding of this, and understand how to change between dimensions. However, because of certain events that happened on Earth 13,000 years ago, we have all forgotten, but we're about to remember. So if we show each note in the chromatic scale as a circle, we have 13 circles. Each circle represents a white or black key, and the shaded circle at the end would be the 13th note, that begins the next octave. This circle here represents the third dimension. This is where we are, and this circle next to it would be the fourth. In Lesson 3, we talked about channeling, and this is typically where channeled beings are. This is also where you explore when you are astral projecting or lucid dreaming. You'll notice now that the musical system goes upwards and downwards forever, octaves over octaves over octaves. Theoretically, this is how the universe goes too, an infinite spectrum of universes in both directions going upwards and downwards forever. I mean, come on, we thought our universe was big, but everything in our universe, as far as we can see, well, that's just this one dimension. You may have heard people talk about 144 dimensions and how 144 relates to other spiritual subjects. This is because there are 12 notes in an octave and 12 overtones between each note. 12 times 12 equals 144 dimensional levels. To be specific, there are 12 major dimensions and 132 minor dimensions within each octave, though in truth this progression probably goes on forever. The diagram we've been looking at represents one octave. The 13th note repeats, and then there's another octave after that. Looks like I'm about done for the day. I want to show you this. I was watching Ancient Aliens not long ago, and one of the natives who has communication with beings in higher dimensions told the man who was interviewing him
that they have always been here, even right here where we're sitting right now, but you just don't see them. They're in a different frequency.
And no one really got what he meant. So that's kind of a fresh perspective on that.
We're in the middle of some fast solar wind. We have some gorgeous filament eruptions and some active regions both on the sun's front side and on the sun's far side are growing. Space weather this week is getting pretty active. As we take a look at our Earth-facing disk, we do have this massive coronal hole we've been dealing with over the past few days, and we're going to continue to deal with it for probably the next 2 or 3 days before things finally calm down. We had been getting some fast wind from this pocket here. All of this in here, however, is pretty much at higher latitude, so Earth is just barely getting grazed by this fast solar wind. Therefore, we've only been seeing active to possibly minor storm conditions kind of on and off throughout this past week. We will continue to see that as time goes on. But that's not the big story. The bigger story has to do with these regions right here. We have region 4136, 4139, and a couple others that have been growing in here. These have been firing off smaller solar flares, but they're growing quite rapidly. So we're going to be expecting that the risk for radio blackouts is going to continue to rise over the next couple days. Plus, you'll see this filament here get blown off, mainly from activity from this region here. It kind of destabilized the edge of this filament, and we'll talk more about that in a sec. But first, I want you to see over here, region 4041 and a couple regions on the sun's far side. Look at this. You see this massive filament eruption. You can't really see it from SDO's view, but when we switch to the SUVI instrument on GOES, we sure can see this thing. So again, this is from Earth's view. So this is activity that's happening essentially on the far side. But look at this eruption and this gorgeous filament. It's not Earth directed, but it was part of a huge eruption on the sun's far side. And as we take a look in coronagraphs, you can see this massive partial halo. You would think that this would be Earth directed, but it really isn't. This is all blowing basically away from Earth. So we're not getting any Earth impact from that. But boy, was this beautiful eruption. However, that's not the only one. Just shortly after that one erupted, look at region 4136. Like I said, all this activity in this area really causes this filament to lift off. You can't really see that. It kind of disappeared for a sec. The image did because we were in eclipse season, which means that the moon comes between the sun and the SDO spacecraft. So sadly, we kind of blacked out right when this filament left off. But again, as we switch to our SUVI instrument, you can see just a gorgeous display. Look at this filament eruption. Just beautiful. Whoosh. Now look at this. See the edge of this? This is region 4136, and this is the scar that tears off of the sun right here. Now this part right in here is in the Earth strike zone, but as we watch the bulk of this filament lift off, do you see how it's all kind of going to the northeast? Sadly, despite the fact that it looks like we could get clipped by this region or by this filament eruption, we probably won't. In fact, as we take a look at the view in coronagraphs, you can see this big, not even really a partial halo, but you can see this big signature of that structure going basically to the northeast of Earth. Sadly, there is a filament eruption that also occurs off to the west, and that means that whatever signature might have been down in here is kind of getting camouflaged by this. So likely we're not going to get hit by this filament eruption, probably just going to get a little bit of a bumpy ride, but that might be along with the tail end of this fast solar wind. So can't say that we're going to have any Earth-directed solar storms right now. However, these regions are still being very active. You can see them right here. In fact, we're going to get another number here in just a moment as right there as more and more of these regions begin to pop out here. So as this cluster begins to rotate to the west limb, expect that the noise on the bands to continue to rise. Expect the risk for radio blackouts to rise. In fact, I think we're sitting at about 15% chance of an R3 level radio blackout just right now. And that could increase over the next couple days. It also means we could see a bigger risk for radiation storms. So you aviators definitely pay attention, because, and those people who care about high latitudes, we could definitely see a risk for radiation storms growing over the next couple days. But outside of that, we're just going to be paying attention very much to what's going on the sun's far side and getting rid of this coronal hole while we're waiting for this new one to rotate into the Earth strike zone, which will happen probably in about 10 days. And now taking a look at our far-sighted sun, we can use stereo A imagery again, because stereo A has finally orbited beyond the west limb of the sun from Earth's view, and it can still see part of the sun's far side. So in fact, as we look at stereo imagery, you can see here's Earth, here's the sun, and here's stereo A staring at the sun just a bit from the side. In fact, you can really see that coronal hole that we see at Earth's view is pretty much on the eastern side of the sun. Only a small extension of it is on the western side of the sun from stereo's view. And stereo can still see region 4130 and 4134. In fact, this is where all of that activity is with all those southern eruptions and that big filament eruption. So as we watch, as this region they rotate to the west limb here, about on the 15th, you can see a big eruption going off there, and now that lights off this. You'll see this big tear all the way down as that filament lets go. Watch it. Look at that. All the way down. So there's at least 2, if not 3 eruptions right there. Then we get another one, boom, right there, and then we get another one pretty soon after that, within 24 hours or so. Boom, there's another, boom. So how many is that? Like 5? My goodness, this just alight with activity on the sun's far side right now. And so we're going to be watching these very closely. Sadly, they're moving out of stereo A's view, but we'll look at them in the full sun map, because solar orbiter is staring at the sun's far side, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But as you can see, the activity continues to rise, and that means that in about 10 to 12 days, when these regions rotate back into Earth view, we will be watching to see if they are still solar storm producers. And now switching to our full sun map, we're taking a look at stereo AIA imagery. That's what you see here in red, as well as solar orbiter EUI imagery. That's what's in blue. This is the far side of the sun. This is the front side of the sun. You can see the east limb and the west limb from Earth's view sitting right here. So this is what the front side of the sun looks like right now. Quite a few active regions. The far side doesn't look too shabby either. We got quite a few active regions there. Over the past week, as I put this in motion, you can see regions 4130, 4134. You can see all of that activity. This is where that southern filament eruption occurred. All of that activity continues to grow. You can see even new regions growing. So we definitely know that we're going to be getting some activity all around the far side. In fact, solar orbiter has been showing big solar flares over the last few days, in particular up at almost an R2 level radio blackout. So we're paying attention. On top of that, let me back this up just a smidge, and you can see we've got a new region that's been emerging on the sun's disk. This is from solar orbiter's view, starting around the 11th. This one, well, let me see if I can back it up a little bit more. Maybe around the 10th. My goodness. Yes, around the 10th, that's when this region started emerging. That's about when we started seeing some of these bigger flares. But you can also see a couple other flaring regions up in here, 4144. You can see 4125 and 4127. These regions, this one here is also associated with all of the activity we've seen in the south there. So believe it or not, the sun's far side is really a kind of a bigger hotbed of activity than the front side right now. We're going to see this region rotate into Earth view in probably about 3 to 4 days. So get ready, amateur radio operators and emergency responders. We could start seeing some flare risk really begin to rise, not just over this week, but also over next week as well, as some of these other regions begin to rotate into Earth view. So enjoy the quiet while you have it.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back. It is July 19th, 2025, and the footage I'm getting ready to share with you on this video was taken from my backyard just moments ago. What this footage clearly illustrates is that these plasma orb-like starcraft that have been showing up throughout my skies on a consistent basis are very low in Earth's atmosphere. And I want to remind you, watch the footage I share with you in 4K. If you're watching in a lower resolution, it's harder to see the definition of the video. But that being said, all these orb-like craft that I've been documenting are visible with the naked eye. That's why you'll see me quickly pan the camera right to where the object is, rather than searching the sky with the camera trying to find something. There's no engine, there's no noise. You also see in this video how this brightly lit craft just suddenly disappears, almost as if it went through a portal. This is big stuff, my friends. So I just want to continue to encourage you to develop your discernment, your intuition, and also just to spend some of your own time doing a bit of sky watching. Grab yourself a zero gravity chair, relax, kick back, clear the mind, and see what you can see. It's exciting times, my friends. The future is bright, the future is beautiful. Stay positive, stay higher vibration.
Let's say for the sake of discussion that when you think of something, anything, it appears right in front of you. No, not physically, but let's say it appears in a different realm, one that is in and around all of us, the field that the scientists were describing by their experiments. We can call it the field, the astral realm, the thought realm, whatever you like. For the sake of simplicity, in this video, let's call it the field. When you're doing something, you start by thinking about it. Whether you're building a pool in your backyard or making a sandwich, you have to have thought of it first. Even the subconscious thoughts for things like walking and breathing. This shouldn't be anything new to us. We think of things before we do them, even if it's a split second before the action. This is just how we function, and the physical actions we take generally match the thoughts that we've created in our minds. You might say that we move through our thoughts, turning non-physical thoughts into physical actions. When an inventor gets an idea, this idea can quickly move through all of his colleagues and friends. And this is because ideas and thoughts are spreadable. Multiple people can concentrate upon the same idea at once, allowing the ideas to grow and develop further. This isn't anything strange. Think tanks have existed long into our history. In this scenario, don't think of thoughts as separate, but as a whole that everyone is focusing upon at the same time, and maybe even through time itself. Of course, because we can't physically see this realm of thoughts, we have to use functions like speech and body language in order to communicate them. At least for now, this is how we connect and bridge our thoughts together, through communication. Because of this, we add a bit of our own creation to the mix every time we share something, our own spice, if you will, while still working towards the same common goal. A social gathering is another good example of this at work too. People gather together because they share the same thoughts and emotions as the rest of the people there. Even if you're using something that someone else made, which, let's face it, basically every aspect of our lives involves using something that someone else or nature itself produced, you're still creating your own experience for yourself. You manifested that iPad, house, relationship, or whatever into your experiences. With the notion that thoughts connect with other thoughts comes our first big realization. This new understanding of just how intertwined we really are. We are not only connected in the physical realm, but mentally and spiritually as well. Up until recently, humankind has always understood that they were connected only through their physical being. We assumed that the conscious experience and all of the thinking was totally 100% isolated from everyone else. The fact is, we're not. We are so connected with each other, it's almost impossible to believe. But it's true. We have the science to back it up. Now, thoughts being created are just the tip of the iceberg. The real interesting part comes when you look at emotions. Emotions are much more powerful than thoughts in that they have more gravity. Emotions pull on you. They often control your actions and guide you throughout your life. It's not always your thoughts that decide where you sit in a classroom or on a bus, but rather if you like that girl or you think that guy smells. When a couple is together, it's their emotions that keep them tethered. If they're fighting, it's their emotions that break them apart. You watch TV or movies that stimulates and compels you on an emotional level. You hang out with friends because you have emotional bonds with them. And now this applies on a smaller scale too. Do you ever have a morning where you wake up grumpy and stub your toe getting up and just think, this is just gonna be one of those days. And then the entire day following is terrible and just everything goes wrong? What about days where you wake up excited and happy and ready to go? Your whole day is just excellent in all of the right ways. Even if something bad does happen, you're less affected by it because you're in such a great place emotionally. The reason for these different potentials in how your day goes is due to your emotional state. And to that end, if you wake up in the morning and just take a deep breath and say a prayer of gratitude for your life and the dawning of a new day, it will instantaneously align you with a more harmonious day for yourself. Even if something bad does happen, you can experience it as an opportunity for learning and growth rather than something that, sucks, poo, now I'm in a bad mood, grr. You see, it's through our conscious participation in our own lives that transforms us from riding on the waves of other people's joys and sorrows to creating our own waves and living the life we want to have. You can look into society and see how we create our lives actively by the way that people speak and act. Those who are the most successful are those who talk most of success, and the people who speak most of illness have that. Yes, illness is also a creation of ours. If we have a low immune system, it's because of our own low vibration, which is a product of the disharmony both within us and in our environment. It also relates heavily with food, the primary nourishment that we put in our bodies. Food is a massive conversation on its own, and you can learn more about it in our food series, episode 33. We can liken healing with healthy food to healing from mental and emotional struggles. What quality of thoughts are you allowing into your heart and mind? In this way, healing is a simple process of going inside and addressing our own negativity, resolving the traumas, releasing the pent-up emotional energy, and making room for more light to come through. There's one thing that becomes apparent with this new understanding. We create our reality. We may not always be 100% in control of what happens to us. However, we are 100% responsible for what we do with the experiences that we've had. And we are especially responsible for our own healing of the bad experiences too. Throughout history, we have always played the blame game. It's his fault I didn't get the promotion. It's her fault I couldn't go to the game. It's everyone else's fault I'm so depressed. Whatever it is, and this might be the hardest part to truly get, it's you. All of it is within you.
Your happiness, your sadness, your fears, and your fortunes. Every single experience of your life on Earth was because of you, for you, and within you.